the number one team in the roster rankings here, the San Francisco 49ers. As you look through it and think about all of the star power that they have, this looks like the clear slam dunk best team in the NFL from a roster standpoint. It's the Niners.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, certainly, the star power that they have, the high end is ridiculous. Like that exercise we did of trying to just identify their three best players was crazy, particularly relative to most other teams on the roster. The assembly of skill position players in particular that they've got is absolutely nuts. Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. You throw in Trent Williams as the best left tackle in the NFL. You throw in Nick Bosa, a genuine defensive player of the year candidate in any given season. Fred Warner, the best linebacker in the NFL. Like, the high end is absolutely crazy. There are holes, though. It's not like this is top to bottom. There's no weaknesses at all. There's some areas that you don't necessarily love, particularly in terms of depth. I mean, we've been talking about the offensive line needing work for years. Again, with the caveat that the Kyle Shanahan system hides deficiencies on the offensive line like nothing else.
Yeah, I think it's tough in these things. You're trying to how do they weight quarterbacks here? I think we always have to weigh the quarterback. It's not just a simple, unit by unit breakdown. I don't know how much they weighed QBs in this whole thing, and it's tough to separate the players from the coaches, right? I mean, the Chiefs are number 2 on the ranking here. I think if you're just looking at the talent on the team, the Chiefs would be a little bit lower, much like they were last year. But it's tough to separate, the Mahomes factor, the Andy Reid factor, and Spags. You got Spags over there as well, Sam, tying it all together. I think it's harder for me to put the Chiefs up that high. But even when you're looking at the Niners, the pure talent, again, it's tough to separate Deebo Samuel from the fact that Kyle Shanahan is the one pulling the strings, putting Deebo Samuel in position to succeed here. But when you just look at the talent, I think the Niners are the team. There are other teams that would be competing there. All that said, are the Niners a tick worse than they were last year? I think the defensive line has lost a little bit of depth. I look at it both ways. The offensive line that we keep questioning, they're not disastrous, and they're all coming back, and they're all adding a year of experience from an O-line perspective. That means a lot. And I mentioned on the Top 3 show, Brock Purdy's heading into year 3. And if we just look at it through the lens of Brock Purdy heading into year 3 and what he's done in his first 2 seasons, that's in the Niners' favor, that he'll continue to progress and get better. I guess my question is, did they lose a little bit of depth on that defensive line? But overall, I think the Niners look like the best roster in the NFL, as I've said.
Yeah, I mean, I think so the way to factor in coaching, in my opinion, is it's only relevant. It's not relevant in abstract terms, right? So we know Kyle Shanahan basically improves everything on the 49ers roster. And therefore, there are players on this roster that we think outside of the Shanahan environment probably wouldn't look as good, fare as well, play as well, be thought of as highly. But since the two of them are together for this season, which is the only way of measuring this, after the fact, it doesn't matter, right? Whereas with New England and Belichick departing, the same thing is true on the defensive side with Belichick. There are players that will look better with Belichick as their coach, but he's no longer there. So that, I think, is where you start to look at it and say, all right, now you've disconnected the head coach or the coach and the player. Now we actually need to start looking at whether that talent exists independent of the coaching, or if it's only when you put them together, you get this version of the player. So when you look at, the impact that Andy Reid has on the Chiefs, the impact that Shanahan has on the 49ers, to me, it doesn't matter whether, how much of the Brock Purdy success is Brock Purdy, how much of it is the receiving help, how much of it is Kyle Shanahan. That's its own interesting intellectual exercise, but for the purposes of roster, how good is the roster, it doesn't matter because they're all playing there together this year. They're all contributing. The sum of those is the important part for how good this roster is, not necessarily which individual piece is the driving force behind that. That's only relevant if you break that up and it's no longer collective anymore.